Ara Monagem. I'm a professor at the University of Eswatini in Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. I am a lecturer in the biological sciences, specializing in zoology and specifically the ecology of small mammals and birds. We are engaged in doing a survey up an elevational gradient on a mountain, and a particularly important mountain, the Drakensberg Mountains. The foothills of the mountain here are at about 1,500 meters, so that's where our lower survey sites are, and we're extending the surveys right up to the summit above 3,000 meters. And the purpose is to get an idea of how biodiversity changes along this gradient. As you move up the mountain, the temperature gets colder, rainfall gets higher, all sorts of environmental conditions change, especially making it more challenging as you go higher. So the biodiversity responds to that as well, and we're trying to find out exactly what that response is going to be. So this is very much a collaboration. The driving university or institution is the University of the Free State, and in particular it's the ARU, Afro-Montane Research Unit, that is driving this. The study is in fact a multi-institutional study, drawing people from across the country. I've come from Eswatini, a neighboring country. There are people here from Rhodes that have come to do sampling that are also not part of the Free State, the University of the Free State. So it really is a unique setup with a lot of very good researchers, very good students. There's a whole element of capacity building here. Much of this work is in fact being run not by lecturers and professors, but by their students. And so this is very encouraging to see young scientists, young ecologists that are very knowledgeable on the fauna and flora of these mountains that are doing the surveys and sampling. Small mammals, we're trapping them in what are called Sherman traps. These are little metal box traps that catch the animal alive, and so they are not harmed in the process. We catch them, identify the animals, take some body measurements, and then release them afterwards. The bats we're recording in a very different method by recording their echolocation calls. Bats have this characteristic of echolocation, which they use for navigation purposes. But our interest in the echolocation is that different species of bats have different echolocation calls. So by recording these ultrasonic sounds the bats make, we can actually identify many, if not most of those bats. And so we've got bat detectors specially designed to capture these ultrasonic sounds. They're well above hearing, so we can't hear them with our ears, but these detectors can capture that. And then we've got detectors all the way up this elevational gradient, just like we're doing the trapping up at different sites at different elevations. The birds, we are observing them through binoculars, and we are recording what birds we find at the same sites that we're catching rodents, the same sites we're doing bats and insects and so on, and making lists and abundances of birds at those different elevations. Well, very often the habitat at the top of a mountain is very different from the surrounding landscapes, and this means that the species that live up in the top of mountains very often are endemic to that region. And the Drakensberg here is one of those special mountains that has a very high proportion of endemic species. Endemic plants that occur nowhere else in the world except here. Lizards, there are snakes even. There are birds that occur just in the Drakensberg mountains, like the Drakensberg rock jumper, for example. these are plants, animals with very small distributional ranges. So these animals are specifically adapted to living under those harsh, cold conditions on top of the mountain. Now the problem is with climate change, as the climate gets warmer, the mountain warms up and those extreme conditions move up the elevational gradient. But mountains eventually run out of elevation and you cannot go higher than the top of the mountain. So if the climate carries on getting warmer, these animals and plants will move up the mountain, not necessarily the same animal or plant, but over generations they will shift their distributions higher up the mountain, but we get to a point where there's no more mountain to climb, and then those animals become at risk of extinction. So this is why climate change is particularly hard on mountain biodiversity. As far as the benefits to the local community go, one of the things that can assist communities is to make use of the biodiversity that these communities have lived with for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Biodiversity that people from other regions will happily pay large amounts of money to come and see. I believe this is it's one of those unique areas in South Africa that has very high tourist potential, and it could be a draw card, not just for South Africans, not just for Southern Africans, but from people around the world that could come here to come and look at these beautiful landscapes and then look out for those species that hopefully we will find, the endemics and the more difficult, rarer species that could also be reasons that people will come here. All of this should be integrated into the community, the surrounding communities here, so that they are directly benefiting from this, not just through jobs and employment creation, but also all kinds of other ways like sharing of gate fees to enter, the accommodation costs and so on, things that have been designed elsewhere in the continent and that have worked to help both biodiversity conservation and empowering of local communities. Highlights, it's hard because everything is a highlight here. Climbing to the top, the summit at about 3,000 meters, that's always a highlight. I wouldn't say it's a challenging climb, but you have to exert yourself a little bit to get up there. The chain ladder makes it a bit unique, a bit novel and exciting. That certainly is a highlight. The landscape at the top there, even though everything that we're working in is grassland, but the grasslands at the top there are very different, they look very different, they are very different, and it's a landscape that we are not really used to for those of us who come from the lower parts of I live at 600 meters above sea level in a savanna environment. Up above 3,000 meters, it's rolling mountain grasslands, very beautiful. That certainly is a highlight. Working in mountains, the biggest drawback in my opinion is the rain and the cold. And we had that on Tuesday, I think, 3-4 days ago, where it rained basically the whole day, making it impossible to do any field work. I think it's hard to speak for everybody. I have not got in touch with some of the groups, but from the groups I was involved in, the bats, the small mammals, the birds, yes, I think it's been a great success. We've seen a lot of species, we've captured a lot of species, and we are now just getting the baseline information in that's allowing us to sort of have something to compare with. And it's at this stage not enough to draw any conclusions, but the methods we're using seem to be working, and so it's now a matter of applying this over multiple seasons, multiple years, and I am sure we're going to come up with some very useful information and data.